to Cinepro, where we bring your favorite movies back to life with quick recaps, hidden details, and everything you missed. The events of today's movie begin with the world's most dangerous criminals, who were transferred to a high-security prison, isolated in the sea and placed on a large ship. The first criminal we meet is Barg, who has killed countless people, around 100 for reasons unknown. He's a cold-blooded man, unapologetic for his actions, mocking and insulting the officer. But the officer teaches him a lesson and silences him completely. We then move to the police headquarters, where Officer David explains everyone's specific duties. Later, each criminal is placed in a solitary cell, each with a guard to explain the rules of the place. Being criminals, they didn't take kindly to the instructions and started causing trouble, except for one calm man named Tom. Since his arrival, he hasn't made a sound. And since women are involved in everything, we see a few women imprisoned in the same facility. The first one we meet is Jenny, who killed her husband and family. The officers in charge of the women include Officer Mary and Dr. Max, and of course, such dangerous criminals need constant monitoring because of the chaos they can cause. Doctors were also brought in to assist, and the current doctor with them is Ella, who helps Dr. Max organize the medical supplies. However, she doesn't notice Dr. Max stealing a few syringes from the medicine cabinet and putting them in his pocket. We then shift to the cooks, who were preparing food for the prisoners and officers, until Max entered after stealing the medicines and hid them in a bag. In reality, no one knows that doctor. Max is currently the most dangerous person on the ship. He's here for a mysterious prisoner named Alpha to administer the injections throughout his stay. He's locked away in a secret room, a fact known only to Officer David, who received a file containing some information about the prisoner Alpha. Moving on, we see the prisoner Barg hiding a nail in his mouth. He uses it to unlock his handcuffs, then throws it to the prisoner next to him to help him escape. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, we discover that some of the cooks are Barg's men. They brutally kill the real cooks and hide their bodies to avoid suspicion. When an officer comes to check on the prisoners, Barg and his accomplice kill him too, placing his body with the others in the freezer. Barg then gathers his men, takes control of the control room, kills the officers inside, cuts the wires for the cameras and control systems, leaving the police unable to communicate with headquarters or see what's happening. Realizing something is wrong, the officers quickly gather to head to the prison. In moments, they arrive at the scene, enter the control room, and are shocked by the cut wires and the criminals attacking them viciously. Armed and dangerous, the criminals kill everyone they encounter. Officer Mary and another officer fight back, shooting at the criminals. Eventually, they manage to kill them all. One of the guards, barely alive, tells Mary about the situation, the criminals, and how to contact headquarters through the wireless phones in the engine room. Meanwhile, Barg and his men release all the prisoners, who celebrate their freedom, except for Tom, who warns them that the police won't let this slide and will retaliate. However, the criminals dismiss his warning, especially after killing many officers. Dr. Max enters the examination room where Ella is eating, unaware of the chaos outside. He informs her of the situation, warning that they'll be killed if they try to escape. The prisoners spread throughout the ship, stealing food and anything they can find. One prisoner, Gian, enters the freezer, discovering the frozen bodies of the victims. He's puzzled, unaware that the pipes are leaking not water or gas, but blood. Suddenly, the blood drips onto Alpha's face, waking him from his coma. He violently removes his breathing apparatus. At the same time, officers enter the scene, trying to control the situation, only to be horrified by the bodies and blood everywhere. The officers regroup, realizing the criminals are planning to escape after killing all the guards. Barg and his men destroy the place, including the control room, to cover their tracks. They head toward the engine room, where Barg's men had already killed everyone inside. Before they could kill the last worker, the officers arrive, engaging in a fierce battle, killing the criminals one by one. The fight intensifies with the arrival of the mad criminal Alpha. Strangely, the battle halts at his presence. He's blind, relying on body heat and his heightened sense of smell to locate his targets. Alpha moves swiftly among them, killing them with a single strike, without any weapons, splitting them in half with just his arms. Seeing this, Barg flees with his men, but Alpha senses them, catches up, and kills Barg's two companions. He approaches Barg slowly, strikes him violently, and coldly dismembers him with an axe. Even the officers are terrified of Alpha, trying to escape quickly, except for Tom, the calm one, who fights Alpha to buy time for the others to escape through a small exit. Tom pulls Ella along, closing the door just before Alpha reaches them. Back at the police headquarters, Officer David uses satellite surveillance to understand the situation. Realizing the criminals have escaped and killed many officers, he contacts someone named Derry, sending him to the ship to investigate. Focusing on Alpha, we notice strange marks and terrifying scars on his body, with a number engraved on his skin, similar to the one on Alpha. The survivors of this massacre quickly move to the ship's deck, preparing lifeboats to escape. But suddenly the killer reappears, his body drenched in blood, and he began killing them with new brutality. We see Ayla in the watermelon water, observing from the window with the doctor standing at a distance. Suddenly, Alpha breaks through the window and starts strangling her. Uncle Max, upon seeing this, fled quickly, terrified. Eventually, he encounters the officers and Tom. The officer attacks Alpha and threatens him to confess. We learn that Max had been injecting Alpha with this serum, thinking it would induce sleep, as someone had paid him to do so, unaware that the serum would awaken Alpha. The officer decides to hide Mary and the others in a safe place while he searches for any survivors. Later, we see the criminal Gian entering and exiting rooms, unsure of what is happening, until he reaches the women's prisoner room and meets Jenny. Jenny manages to lock up the officer accompanying her after beating him severely. She was with a criminal, and they were celebrating until suddenly Alpha enters and starts taking them down one by one. Jenny and Gian quickly escape into the elevator, locking themselves inside. At the same time, the officer arrives and sees what's happening. Jenny is pulled out of the elevator just in time, but unfortunately, Gian cannot be saved as Alpha unexpectedly pulls the elevator, killing him. The elevator collapses on both Alpha and Gian. The officer thinks Alpha is dead too, but no, he's still alive and stands calmly. The officer hides Jenny in a freezer and confronts Alpha, shooting at him and managing to sever his arm. However, Alpha's other arm retaliates violently, attacking the officer relentlessly despite his severed arm. Alpha then opens the freezer where the bodies are stored. Jenny pretends to be dead. Suspicious, Alpha smears his bloodied hand on her face. When she doesn't react, he assumes she's dead and leaves. Meanwhile, Tom and the others are in the room where Alpha was imprisoned. They find some papers and files about Alpha, revealing that he has been alive for a long time and has survived multiple attempts on his life. It turns out Alpha has been alive since 1943 during World War II. Alpha was a soldier who was killed by Japanese soldiers during the war. They experimented on his body to make him as strong as an entire army. Dr. Max discovers through his analysis that Alpha possesses superhuman strength and is unlike any human, retaining his appearance from 1943. We flash back to 1943, learning about a slightly mad Japanese scientist who conducted experiments on humans. He experimented on the unfortunate Alpha, torturing him until Alpha suddenly awakens, breaks free from his chains, and begins killing them in a terrifying and brutal manner. Returning to the present, we see David with some soldiers and officers heading to the ship. One of them injects himself with a strange substance to gain the same strength as Alpha. They reach the ship and encounter Jenny, who asks for their help, but they ignore her, focusing solely on killing Alpha. They even shoot Jenny, killing her. Later, they find Tom's team and discover that Tom also has Alpha's abilities. Rewinding a bit, we learn that David and his men had entered a strange place filled with people, binding them and conducting experiments. Most of the experiments failed, except for Tom, whose experiments succeeded. This made Tom the only one capable of defeating Alpha. Tom escaped from David and his men, living a normal life, even marrying and having children. But when David discovered Tom was still alive, he went to Tom's house and coldly killed his wife and son. Devastated, Tom disguised himself as a criminal, causing trouble to get imprisoned and exact revenge on David at the right time. Years pass, and in the present, Tom attacks David's men. Suddenly, the big boss, Alpha, arrives, and he and Tom engage in a fierce battle. We learn that David had injected himself with the serum to enhance his strength, and he also attacks Alpha. David's newfound strength is terrifying, allowing him to attack both Alpha and Tom. After defeating Alpha, David smugly looks at Tom, recalling how he killed Tom's young son. Tom, seeking revenge for his son, attacks David with all his strength, throwing him into the sea and jumping in after him to finish him off. It is revealed that the island was designated for experiments. David had been working with others to conduct experiments on prisoners. We then see a young boy imprisoned, who turns out to be Tom's son. David hadn't killed the boy upon noticing he also had superhuman abilities due to his eye color. Instead, he continued experimenting on him. It is revealed that David was also one of the Japanese soldiers from 1943 who had undergone experiments, giving him abilities similar to Alpha's. David's goal was to gather children with superhuman abilities and experiment on them. Tom, still alive, emerges from the sea, determined to join the dangerous organization that kidnapped his son. After all these years, he's ready to confront them. If you liked today's video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to receive all new updates. See you in the next video.